All right, what's going on, everyone? I'm Andrew with HitTrax. Thank you for coming through. Typically, I guess at this point in the past, we would introduce what HitTrax is. I don't think we really need to do that. Now, I think if you don't know, come by the booth. You'll get a quick understanding of what we have going on. So today, I wanted to focus on maybe something a little bit more intricate and a part that maybe doesn't get as much love on the system as it deserves, and that is controlling the strike zone. So within HitTrax, if you're familiar, you've got an extremely accurate strike zone every time you use the system. Whatever mode you're in, you're capturing the pitch data, and within about a quarter inch, you know where that pitch is located. It tends to be one of the first things that guys look to after a swing in the cage, and it just kind of helps build this knowledge of the zone. Hence the discussion today. And I brought a couple guys that are a lot smarter than me on this topic to talk about it. So we're joined by Donegal Fergus, the Loyola Marymount, CJ Gillman with the Seattle Mariners. It's funny because I've told this like 500 times, but Donegal called me when he was at UCSB and he was looking at the system and he goes, "Hey, is it possible, like I want to buy this thing, but I just want the strike zone." He's like, "I just want to see the zone. That's all I want. Can you put that up?" So I told you no.
Yeah, you did.
It seems like maybe you like some of the other stuff too.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. So much so that you got one at Loyola. Yeah. So, and then I asked you if you had anybody else in mind, and you brought up CJ. And CJ, you got a system from us back when you were at Air Force.
Yep.
Back in the day, and now you're running the show with the Mariners farm system. I appreciate you guys being here. So to kind of hop into it, there's a little bit of a slide deck, but I really just kind of want to get your guys' perspective. So, coming from two different sides, pro ball, college ball. Donegal, I'll start with you. You've been involved with both. Now You're the head coach at Loyola. What has been your focus? What has kind of driven you to, start diving into and take appreciation for zone control?
Yeah, well, as you remember in our first conversation when I went back to Santa Barbara from working with the Twins, was the whole impetus of this conversation was when I took the job with Minnesota, one of the first things they said was, "Hey, can you come down in a couple of weeks? We're installing the HitTrax unit." And I was like, really? I mean, what did we need that for? We're going to hit outside every day. And I was sort of underwhelmed by the idea. And they're like, "Well, we already bought it, so come on down, please." And it turned into one of my absolute favorite tools because so much of what we were trying to do early on there was change swing patterns, right? And change zone discipline and swing decisions. And a lot of those young players, they understood sort of the concept of I should swing at better pitches, right? I mean, I think most hitting coaches would agree with that concept, but getting them to see what they were actually swinging at in real time and getting them to compete in that way, like, it's one thing to say, "Hey, you need to not chase the slider down." It's another thing to say that was that pitch, right? And they can see it right then. And the feedback that other players could give them, it accidentally became my favorite tool. And that's where hey, can we just put the strike zone up? Because that's all they wanted to do every day was compete. They were throwing money down on the floor to try and compete with each other to not chase this one or only hit these in one of the boxes. And it really was the quickest and easiest way for players to control their own process of changing their swing decisions. So when I came back to Santa Barbara, it was a no-brainer for me. That's what I wanted to get our guys to do. And in both levels, both in professional baseball and in college, so much of the work that players have to do is on their own, right? And the more tools that we can give guys to control their own process of that, I think the better. And it's unimpeachable feedback, right? It's not me saying, "Hey, I think that was down," and the player saying, "I thought it was pretty good." And it's just right there on the screen, right? Now they know they can control their own thought process on it. So it was pretty easy call for me to come back and do that and give our players a chance to be owners of that process for them.
Oh, I love it, and that's you don't have to say anything to them even at all. They can look up and see it.
Yeah, it's right there.
Right away, right? Yeah. So, and CJ, you're, like I said, you're kind of running the show there with the Mariners farm system. And ultimately, I know there's been some hype about really the Mariners plate skills being in a lot of advanced metrics, a top 5 organization at, play discipline, controlling the zone, putting together quality at bats. How do you put that into action, being a guy that's not only working with players, but also within an entire organization, and you've got, I don't know how many coaches translating the message that you're relaying to them?
Yeah, I mean, it was the message long before I got there. I mean, it's no secret for us. It's printed on our T-shirt. Dominating the strike zone, controlling the strike zone. Whatever ours says, dominating the strike zone. But since the beginning of time, it's been you're only as good as the pitch you swing at. And so, I think for us, like building language around it, building a culture around it, just having anything that can provide accurate feedback, whether it's as good as a HitTrax or it's a medicine ball put behind home plate, being intentional with it, doing it every day. There's I know people want the secret sauce with everything, but there isn't, right? It's just doing it every single day. That low drum in the background of the feedback that it's giving you. The more accurate the feedback, the better. We don't do anything special. We just talk about it all the time. And we tell better stories every day, and we use examples from games and practice, and it's just something that if you talk about it every single day, it's bound to improve, right? You get a little deeper into it, you hire good people, good teachers, good coaches, whatever, but you hire good teachers and you give them a good message, the students, the hitters are going to get better.
I think that's a really good point too, just to build on is, it isn't like, obviously we both love HitTrax for this purpose, but your players will see what you pay attention to, right?
Yep.
What you value, they're going to value if you're doing it on a daily basis. And
Yep.
whatever that is, whether you can get a HitTrax unit or not, paying attention to the choices that you make in the batter's box and how you come to those choices too is really what it's about. So you can scale that however you need to, but there is no substitute for that. You have to value it, you have to talk about it every day and make sure that they understand how important it's going to be for their long-term success.
And so I love that perspective too, of just taking this as it's something that we do every day with everything, right? So when you're in the cage, because that's probably, I would say, one of the most, commonly ways to use HitTrax is in the cage real time. You're with the player there, you're getting immediate feedback. Whatever you're doing, whether you're doing, the traject machine or whether you're doing front toss, you're building a knowledge of the zone. And I think that's one of the things that stuck out to me when we just chatted before, is talking about the confidence that's built by doing that over and over. Is that, do you see that confidence when players know that pitch is a ball? Sometimes they don't even need to look at the screen after a while. They know that's a ball. Do you see that help hitters develop as you kind of build that in and day out?
Yeah, no doubt. It's the low drum, low intensity, thousands and thousands of reps that they're accumulating without really trying to accumulate it. They're working on their swing or they're working on their approach or whatever it is, but they're accumulating those reps kind of just behind the scenes, over and over and over. And I think if you want to convince a player to truly buy into something and to truly do something, the best way is to get him to come upon it himself, right? And so having accurate feedback allows, the accuracy matters, right? And the objectivity of it matters, right? Because if it's accurate and it's objective, the player's going to say, okay, I have some clarity as to what's truly a strike, not just somebody standing behind me, an umpire, human error, whatever it is. I have some clarity on what's truly a strike, and with that clarity comes the conviction that we're trying to build in a player. If we can get any hitter to get in the box and stand in the box, convicted about really anything, right? But ideally the process we're giving him of swinging at a good pitch, we know we're going to have a lot better chance of having success over the long term. We're not, there's no quick fix in it. And that's the secret sauce with it, with the player, is that hey, I'm not going to give you anything today that is going to change your world, right? But I promise you, if you can do this every day, and if you can improve this process every day, you're going to see serious results, over 162 games.
Well, and actually, to that point, it just reminds me of a story. I was at the spring training complex, just watching the hitters go through using the traject machine, and I think it was Kelnick was in the cage, and it's firing like 92, painting on the corner, sliders, and there's a pitch on the outside corner, and he looks back at the screen, he goes, "That's not a strike," and it's short strike. He's like, "That's not a strike, that's off the plate." So I'm like standing off to the side, and I come over and I look, I'm like, "Oh, let's see another one." Boom, same spot. He's like, "That's not a strike." And so I look, and actually, like, the hitting mat had moved from its original location. And he knew, like, right off the bat, he had that confidence. He knew exactly, he didn't have a doubt. It wasn't like, is that he knew, and I think that's the difference that we talked about is as you go up the levels from, youth, travel ball, college, pro ball, the emphasis and the importance of that just exponentially increases, right? It exponentially increases, and the focus on it is so much more important.
First off, yeah, big leaguers are really good.
Yes.
When they say it's a ball, it's generally a ball.
It's a ball. Yeah.
And we're sitting here because we couldn't do things like that amongst many other things. But it's good, better, best with everything. Like the accuracy of a basketball sitting behind it on a bucket is really, really good. But the ability to have the entire strike zone within, I think you said, a quarter of an inch, like, just because you don't have it, I know HitTrax is your product, but just because you don't have a HitTrax doesn't mean you can't improve your swing decisions, right? But just as you get more options to just be more accurate, the accuracy is the king of all of it, right? Because for that exact example, the hitter turns around, says, "That's not a strike." If that is a strike, he's going into the game less confident than he was before because now he doesn't know the strike zone. Hitting's impossible, all the things we talk about all the time. Like, we don't need added emotional stress from all that. So to me, like, that's what the product brings is the accuracy, right? And the more accurate it gets, the more, conviction that we're building in ourselves and in our players. Like, it's a small piece, but it means a ton.
I think just to add to that, the accuracy does matter. And the narrative that you're trying to paint for your player is what matters, right? And wherever you stand as a coach in this scenario, and if you want to sit behind and help with that process, that's fine. But you weren't standing in the box, right? You weren't standing with your eyes turned or not. You're standing probably straight behind. Maybe you're in the roll cage. That's a different vantage point, right? And what really matters is what the player sees and what's actually happening, even if it's off calibration, right? So if I'm seeing the ball farther away than it actually is, I at least can know that, right? I can recalibrate my own eyes as a hitter.
Yep.
And coaches, we're all the same. Like, we think we're right. So if I'm standing back there and I say, "No, I'm telling you, that's right on the edge," that player loses a little bit of that conviction because he knows that I'm just offering my opinion. And what we're really trying to get at is, what is the player seeing and why, right? And we can go into a whole larger discussion about vision training and what we're really trying to get to, which is, why do our brains perceive certain objects in space in a certain way? But this allows the players to calibrate their own vision. It's not just about where did the ball end up, it's about where the ball started and ended up, right? And how did I perceive that process? The more that they can tie those two things together, as CJ said, the more they can go into a game going, "Yeah, I'm seeing it good." Because that's every hitter who's ever played goes, "I'm seeing it great." When you ask them, "Why are you so good right now? What's been working for you?" "I'm just seeing the ball really well." That's it. There's a lot of layers to that, but this allows you to, and any attention to this process allows players to combine those two processes.
And I know you have integrated some ways to kind of, put this into competitive environments, right? Mm-hmm. Do you integrate strike zone analysis or just HitTrax in general into creating competitions within the cage? Is that something that you do?
Yeah, I think most coaches would agree. Anytime you get players to compete with each other, that's going to be a better outcome. They're going to stick with it more. They're going to do it more. They love that. Right? They love to compete. And I told you when I first started using it with the Twins, it became on their own. And Lane Adams is over there. He'll tell you stories of guys just yelling at each other about, is that a strike or not? And I'm only swinging at the top 3 boxes. That's it. Only that. Firing up the machine. And it became a daily battle. And they wanted to get in there and prove that their eye was better than the other guy, or they could pull that off, or they could hit that at 100 and plus, or getting players to compete to get better it takes that edge away of, I have to do this, or am I good at it, or I'm not good at it, and it turns it into, I'm gonna get good at it, right? And so for us, especially right now, giving them the ability, that their own profile, and to create opportunities for them to challenge themselves in different ways. And it might be, hey, just swing at strikes or balls. It might be that simple for a young hitter. Just let's try and learn what the zone is first. And for an older guy who's had some success, a little bit track record of what he's good at, what he's not good at, it really might be very specific. I'm trying to take the inner 3 boxes or the outer third, or I'm only taking the bottom out. I had a player in 2019 when I first got to Santa Barbara that I wish I had this setup at that time. It would have made it a lot easier. But he was a player. He was a junior that year and incredibly physically talented, like 6'4", 225, unbelievable athlete. But you could literally tell him, slider, man, we're throwing you a slider, and he was going to swing at it, and he was going to miss it. And mostly sliders down and away, right? Right on right, sliders down and away. Everybody's kryptonite. And he knew it. He's like, I just can't stop swinging at them. They all look like fastballs. And what we talked about was, don't swing at anything in the bottom part of the zone. I want you to lead the country in backwards Ks at the bottom of the zone. We didn't obviously really want him to do that, but we wanted to give him the freedom to eliminate the bottom so that he could learn how to differentiate the two, right? Because he's such in panic mode about it might stay in the strike zone. And all we had was the narrative. All we had was, no, that's down, leave it. Anything below the belt, just leave it. And everybody tried to buy into that. Now we can give a guy much more specific instructions about, hey, if you want to eliminate slider chase, well, let's eliminate everything at the bottom of the zone for a while. We can reintroduce that into your diet, maybe fastballs down there. It gives them the chance to do that and accelerate that acquisition of the vision there, versus me just saying, hey, remember, when we get in the game today, you can't swing at that pitch. They can get thousands and thousands of reps on that very specific topic, and you can get really granular with guys, and you can give them really specific goals to attack. And I'm sure CJ would attest to, like, the more you can give guys things that they can really feel like, I'm visibly improving this, now you can add whatever you want to their arsenal, right? Because now they feel like they're making progress that's sustainable.
And I think CJ kind of helps keep us honest here too, which I think you just alluded to, in that this conversation doesn't really exist without talking about the benefit of the hitter, right? So from the coach's perspective, why does this matter? Because you want to make the guy a better hitter. You don't want a guy, you want a guy focusing on laying off pitches at the bottom of the zone, because in the game he's got to perform better, right? So I loved your perspective on that. Maybe you could talk a little bit about just why this matters. You want to create damage. You want to be an effective hitter at the plate. Why is this a piece of the puzzle, and what is that puzzle in general? What do coaches walk away with that?
Yeah, I mean, in general, in baseball, hitters just swing too much. We just swing at too many pitches. And I don't mean swing too much in practice and training, but like in game, we get in the box and decide to swing at way too much. And to Donegal's point, like, I don't think I've ever called you Donegal. To Fergie's point, yeah, I'll get over it. To Fergie's point, like, it is so hard to tell a hitter, hey, I need you to lay off that pitch at the bottom of the zone, because inevitably he's going to walk into the game and the guy's going to throw it and it's going to clip the bottom and he's going to punch out and he's going to come back to the dugout and be like, thanks, man. Really appreciate it.
I told you. Yeah. I told you that was going to happen.
And we're always dealing with players' careers. Always. It's always about the player. Anything we're doing, nobody's here if it's not for the players. And so I think to get a player better, you need trust, right? And to gain trust, you need to, tell them something that ends up being useful, and then, or tell them something, have them work on it, and then the trust comes from when it actually pays off in a game. And there's so much about hitting just being an open skill. There's so little that we control. What we swing at is like almost the only thing we can control. That, and just how we prepare our actual physiology to get into the box, like, we don't control much else, and so being able to, again, just attach narratives and tell stories about why it's important and then prove it, right? Because every hitter in the history of hitting swings at a ball and knows if they swings at a pitch and knows if they hit it well or not, right? You can immediately tell. If you're standing there, you can tell by the way it sounds. But if you're swinging, your hands will tell you, your body will tell you, just whatever happens, right? So again, talking about like the low drum of just like this thing running in the background constantly, whether it's an actual machine or just a piece of equipment that's giving feedback. That low intensity rep over and over, the player crushing a baseball, looking at the screen and saying, okay, that is where I thought it was, or that wasn't where I thought it was. Like, if we just polled our whole team and said, where do you hit, which pitches do you crush, right? Half of them would probably be pretty close. Half of them would be so far off you would be shocked, right?
Yep.
Coach, I dominate the top of the zone.
Yep.
And it's like, no, you don't, or Coach, I crush pitches low and in. Like, no, you don't, and it's like, it just doesn't go very far. If you have kids, saying no, you don't isn't a very useful way to convince them, right? So just convincing people over and over, letting them come to their own conclusion over and over by just hitting a pitch, looking and saying, oh, I do crush that pitch. And what they're usually going to find is the ones middle are the best ones to swing at, which is all the way back to the original point, we swing too much in game, so let's start pushing all of those in to where we know everybody that plays baseball does the most damage.
I think there's another part of that really needs to be said for coaches at every level, which is the psychology of a hitter is we all live in a world of loss of control. We don't have control over so many things, right? And the pitchers have it so much easier. The pitching guys out there in the pitching space, hey, do this, and you got a pretty good chance of success, right? Hitters, it's not. You can swing at the right pitch, and it wasn't there. Backed up slider, and I saw it good, and it didn't do what it was supposed to do. Or guy standing in the right spot, and he hit it. All hitters face that same lack of control, right? And it's one of the most fundamental fears of human beings is lack of control. If I don't control my world, I'm in trouble. My career's over. I'm not going to play, right? I'm going to get out, whatever it may be. And when a player comes back in the dugout after a punch out that was off the plate or a guy caught it, and he hit it good, but he still caught it. The first thing they want to do is they want it's not a strike, and what am I supposed to do? What do you want me to do on that pitch, right? I don't control that, right? And he's right. We swing. So what the response is? Well, I better swing now. I'm going to swing at that pitch next time, or I can't let the umpire ring me up on that, or I'm going to try and do something else to overcome this. We're trying to get control back, and allowing our players to take some control over something in their world is a huge step in their mental preparation. And anything you want to do on the mental side has to start with that, which is I have control over something. And once I know that I have control over something, I can go into the box with at least something to fight with, right? I have a weapon now. And I think there's an inclination often, because CJ's right, we swing too much. So what most coaches are going to do in that scenario is say, hey, let's not swing as much, man. Let's back off a little bit. Let's be a little more patient.
Right.
Let's be a little more selective. What that typically turns into early, especially with younger hitters, is passive. I just become passive. I'll just take now, right? And now they're just watching stuff go by. They haven't gained any control. They've just stopped doing the thing that is bad, which I guess
is usually an improvement.
It's usually an improvement, but it's not a sustainable improvement over the long term, right? It can fix the problem in the moment maybe, or give them a chance to reevaluate. But what we really want to do is learn how to be aggressive with control about our swing selection, right? So swing less, but intentionally swing less because we're only swinging at the pitches we want to versus just stop swinging so much. So it gives the players a better chance, because I've had this a million times too, where like the scenario I just talked about where you say, hey, man, you gotta back off. You gotta be a little more patient. And they do, and they're like, I did it. Yeah, okay, well, it's not actually helping now. And you're like, but you told me to swing less, and so I did. And you give them the power back of, I'm in control of this process, and I can at least have something to fight with in the box.
To that point there's one way for almost every hitter to improve their swing decision metric, and it's just stop swinging, right? But We talk about this all the time. There's no swing decision trophy at the end of the year, right? Your swing decisions are only as good as you can leverage them for damage or contact, whatever your identity as a hitter is. And I think that's the piece that is missing with our guys, right? We talk about if you're only as good as the pitch you swing at, now extrapolate that into like the best stuff you're going to see off the mound, right? So as the stuff gets better on the mound, what you're swinging at becomes exponentially more and more and more important. And everything just gets harder, right? Everybody just knows it's harder to hit in college than high school, than pro ball, than college, the big leagues, et cetera. But like, to Fergie's point, if it doesn't start with the hitter feeling like I have gained something, I have control of something in this world that there's just like no control, the pitcher starts with the ball, the pitcher starts the action. Everything we know about pitching says throw this pitch to this location with this action and you'll get this expected outcome, And then everything you know about hitting says swing at this pitch, hit it hard, and
hope for the best.
Yeah, and just hope to God that somebody that gets paid a lot of money isn't running around with a glove wherever you hit it. So I just think like that piece of it can't be understated. How you can use whatever tool it is to let your player know like, hey, I'm giving you something. This is something tangible, right? And start just like ripping them away from, I'm not giving you a swing. I'm not giving you a mechanical cue. I'm not giving you this. I'm giving you something actionable that when you walk into the box in 5 seconds, we could actually use, right? Similar to how an approach thought is probably a lot better than an internal mechanical thought as a guy's walking up to the plate, right? We're trying to build confidence and direct our players' energy into confidence building into the right places. Because forever, it hasn't been. I mean, the game literally started because the pitcher was just supposed to start the action, just throw it over the plate. He wasn't trying to get guys out. He wasn't trying to throw nasty stuff, right? The game's obviously wildly different now. And the nastier the stuff gets, generally the less it ends up in the zone, right? And the more important that it is of what we're swinging at and how, to his point of we want to be passive but aggressive when we do decide to swing. When you tell a guy, hey, be a little more patient, he probably says like, well, I'll just take 0-0, right? And it's like, no, wait, that was the good time to swing, right? And now he's panicking because he's got 2 strikes, right? And we get into this cycle that everybody that's coached hitters has ever seen. So I just want to like foot stomp that down as like, that's what we're using this. We're trying to direct our players' energy into like the right way to coach themselves with this.
Yeah, and there's a drill that I like to do that highlights that point, which is you tell a hitter, hey, we're doing a round of 6 here, but you have to take at least 2 pitches. A young hitter almost immediately is just going to take the first 2. You're like, got it, knocked it out, did it. Now I'm going to swing at the next 6. And what they often find out, especially if you're using, some sort of mix, right, either Coach BP or moving the machine around, is then they start to realize, man, those were the 2 best, and I let those go, and I lost the control. And what they pretty quickly realize is, let me actually just make a good decision, right? My 2 will come in there, I'll take them anyway, instead of knocking them out right away or swinging at the first 4 and taking the next 2 and walking out of the cage, giving them the power back to say, when I swing, it's because I made that choice. And especially for young hitters, you're working on a swing and you don't feel good about your mechanics, and you want your coach to give you something mechanical to fix because it feels like you did something. This is a better way to give them something that feels like they did something than just saying, oh, get your elbow up or start with your hands lower or any of the things that we come up with to try and make a player feel like he made progress. Give them this because that is something they can control right away, instantly, and their swing often will clean up in a lot of ways because they swing at better pitches.
For either of you guys then, how much do you care? I guess before I have a question there, but CJ, you talked about maybe a guy eliminating 2/3 of the zone, looking at a specific pitch location. I think maybe Donegal, you mentioned that. Just behind you, what you see, this is like a post-session review where you can see the pitch location of every ball coming through. So we talked about some of the in-cage stuff. There may be a little bit of a transition here to looking at post-session review and data and finding hot and cold zones for guys, right? So to this point, you don't need to speak to this too much, but I'm curious for either one of you, how much does it matter if a guy's swinging at pitches that might be in his damage zone? Does that matter to you so much? Like if he's barreling up a ball, say you're just taking advantage count approaches in the cage, are you focusing at all on like, hey, you are a good hitter down and in, let's find those pitches? Or do you just want him barreling up, balls wherever it is? How much of a focus is there on that?
I mean, I think it depends on how fast the bullets are flying, first off. But there's a big zoom in and zoom out factor here where, we don't use HitTrax to collect all this data. We use generally in-game data and TrackMan stuff. But it's like over the long term, you do want to know where are your tendencies, where are you good, where is your heat map, and it's really like this is a great experiment for everybody that like gets into jumping into anything like this that has enough feedback to kind of truly tell you over a large enough sample where a guy does all his damage, because it's all right in the middle. It's all right in the middle and a little bit one way or the other, right? And so if anything, it just gets your players to a point of like, I need you to get in the box and be ready to hammer a heater that he's going to throw somewhere over the middle of the plate. But I think to your point though, the feedback loop of I just played a game. So like you think about this in stages, right? The first feedback loop that you ever got was the umpire, right? But then you immediately learn that dude's a liar, right? Like half the time you're standing at shortstop, guy throws a pitch, it's a ball, and you're like, okay, I can't trust that guy anymore, right? Because that wasn't a strike. So that's like this first, this big, broad feedback loop that you get. And then, you get to somewhere that, let's say, has TrackMan, and you get to, you go play your game, and you remember the game, and then the next day the report comes out, and it's like, see, I knew that wasn't a strike, or that was a, whatever. And then, but it's not fast enough, right? The speed of the feedback is what makes these things useful, right? So like, that's good, but it's not really helping anybody. It didn't make me any better as a hitter last night, right? So if I'm a hitter, which we're only talking about the players here, like, I don't really care, I care over time. I'll look at it. I'll nod my head. I know swinging good pitches is good, but like, I don't really care, right? But then you get something like this where you can zoom in, and never in a game will we ever know for sure if it was a ball or a strike until they go to ABS, but we can get 1,000 low pressure reps of immediate feedback. And that to me is where post-session review, great, as long as we're looking for trends kind of over time, right? But even in like a single setting, you bolt one ball that's in one certain zone and it's going to skew all your data. So like the ability to look at it over time, great, but the magic is the immediate feedback. I swung at this pitch. In my brain, I know where it was. I crushed it because I just know. I've hit enough in my life to know I crushed that. I turn around. Is it where I thought it was? Is it not where I thought it was? It's probably going to be about thigh high, a little in, a little out. It's probably going to be somewhere over the middle of the plate. So I think, from a post-game report standpoint, like if you don't have TrackMan, if you don't have Hawkeye, if you don't have, if you're a high school coach, whatever it might be, like if you have a HitTrax, we should be using this data right here kind of in the long term, right? In the, like, get a large enough sample to where whatever you're telling the guy, whether it's, a massive, life-changing thing that he's going to hear, or it's just one little nugget, make sure that it's accurate, right? And that's all we're trying to do is stack a good brick, stack a good brick, stack a good brick. That's what I would use the post-game stuff for. The tighter feedback loop in the moment. I hit it, it was bad. I see it, it was a bad pitch to swing at. I hit it, it was good, it was a good pitch to swing at. And just constantly reinforcing that over and over.
I think it's important too, especially if you're going to work on something mechanically with a guy, because CJ's right, like middle for everybody is pretty good, right? You swing at that, you're going to be fine. But you might be trying to get a young hitter to work on the inside a little bit more, right? And he's getting, he's a smaller kid and he's getting just pounded inside and he's nervous about it. He feels uncomfortable. And I think most hitters' problems start on the inner half, right? Because it's the most uncomfortable we get as a hitter. And if I want to address that with a player specifically, well, I need to give him some opportunities to work on that. And a lot of times their perception of inside is off because they're so uncomfortable with it and they're already nervous that they're not going to be good at it, right? And you can use this and really any tool you have to address a mechanical change by allowing you to focus on no, don't worry about the rest today. Let's worry about the inner third here, right? And watch those 3 boxes there and see if you can handle that and how your perception changes, how your move changes. Does your swing get altered because it's in there? Do you bail out a little bit more? Being able to pinpoint something, even if it's not just middle. Middle's great. Like, we should swing at the balls right there as much as we possibly can. But I think it's really valuable to really augment your mechanical work that you're trying to get a player to add to his arsenal, right? It's sometimes you just need to focus on the basics, and then you got some older guys that are ready for something more. That we're gonna build your toolkit here to be able to use the post-session review to say, here's all the things that you got out of that today. And he's right. The game data is what ultimately matters. But for young hitters, sometimes you don't play enough games to really have enough of a sample size.
Sure.
Even in college, sometimes you don't have enough to really know, is that really what I'm good at or not? Like, maybe I was good at it now. And college hitters change so much in their span of 3 or 4 years that we can lose sight of some things. And I think going back to the granular thing, I'm like, let's just focus on this today. Gives guys, again, back to my most important thing for hitters, is give them some control back. Give them something they can be in charge of.
Well, I completely agree too. The game data matters. I think the hard part here is that there's, like you mentioned, youth and high school players that don't have access to that right now, right? That is the gold standard if you can get that. Yes, but one of the things that stuck out there is, working with pro players, you talked about how if we can get a bunch of low pressure reps, which it might be, maybe it's a cultural difference between youth amateur ball where these guys, they're in the cage 95% of the time and they go on the field for 5% of the time, right? And sometimes you have to manufacture some pressure so that's not the first time that they feel it on the field. Do you have any of that where you put guys in pressure situations in the cage? CJ, I know it sounds like these guys, they work. They know what they're doing, and they're paid to do it too, right? So, but I see it in the college level a lot too, where guys will compete, whether that's put on by the coaches or just within themselves, like we talked about. But is that a big part? Do you try to get guys in those situations?
Decision-making breaks down under pressure, right? It's easy to say, and his point is really well taken, which is the low pressure reps to build that mentality. But there is a time when we need to now stress it, right? A mechanic works on a car, right? Tinkers with it and gets it ready. Well, now you got to take it out on the freeway or the racetrack and see what happens, right? And that's what you need to do for young hitters is let's work on something, let's address it, let's focus on it, let's build some skills, and then let's go test it out. And you can't always test it out in the game in the way that you want to, because we don't control those variables. This is a way, or any intentionality in terms of the strike zone awareness can be really helpful. And that's why kids love to compete. Let them compete and turn that pressure up in that way, where maybe it's not the outcome in a game that they're attached to. Now it's just beating their buddy or winning the day with the group that they're in. But you have to be able to test that decision making under pressure for sure.
I don't think the age matters. Nobody likes to suck, and I think the trick of competition is that it takes your mind and puts it in a different place, right? And I think, to Fergie's point, like, you need all of them, right? You need low pressure reps where you can toy around with things, take a pitch that there's no consequence for it, right? It's ultimately just like the consequence that we're worried about, right? And in the cage, there is no consequence, but if you've coached, there is, right? Like, my 7-year-old doesn't like swinging and missing in the cage any more than a big leaguer doesn't like swinging and missing in the cage. It's not something that you just like inherently get used to. And so I think that's the other piece about it being objective, is that everybody's played the game where you're competing hard, and then like something happens and it's kind of like, I don't know if that was a ball or a strike. Like, I don't know what happened, and one guy ends up, taking his ball and going home. Like, that's why they go home, because they feel like it's unfair, right? So I think creating fair competition is probably the best value in the way of that. Like, I'm just here providing the classroom for you guys to learn, right? You guys go compete, and then getting them in that mode, right, is what gets them out of like, okay, fine, I'll go up there and potentially suck. I don't know the outcome here. but it's a competition and that's fun, and I want to beat my friend, so I'm going to go.
Well, we're getting the boot here, but I love the perspective from you guys. I think, two knowledgeable guys, you guys, from the, pro ball and college level here. I appreciate you taking the time and diving into this. If you come by the booth at some point, we do have a new system we're showing off for HitTrax, just a lighter weight, a little bit of flexibility as far as where it mounts. So check out the booth. Hopefully this discussion helped you. And again, Donegal, CJ, I love the conversation. We probably could go for another hour, but thank you guys both.
Sure.
Thanks for having
Andrew.
us.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.